Hi, thank you for tuning in on Tuesday Talks. My name is Michelle Jewsbury. In honor of International Women's Day, which is on March 8th, I would like to give a little background on Women's History Month. In the United States, Women's History Month has been celebrated since 1987. The first time it took place was March 8th, 1911. The United Nations has sponsored International Women's Day since 1975. The reason why I wanted to acknowledge women is Unsilenced Voices is all about empowering women to speak up and giving them the courage to stand up against what is morally wrong, culturally wrong, and beliefs that push them down in society. In 1973, the first battered women's shelter in the United States opened in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I would like to give thanks to the women's advocates that started that first shelter. In the US, since 1973, there have been thousands of shelters that have been created to help battered women. In 1974, in England, there was a woman named Erin Peasay. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She's an author, and she published a book called Scream Quietly or The Neighbors Will Hear. That was the first book about domestic violence from a battered woman's perspective. There have been a lot of influential women in our history, and let me kind of go through a quick list. Cleopatra. If you don't know the story of Cleopatra, she sought to defend Egypt from the expanding Roman Empire. In doing so, she formed relationships with two of Rome's most powerful men, Mark Antony and Julius Caesar. Mary Magdalene, according to the Bible, was one of Jesus's most devoted followers. Mary Magdalene stood near Jesus at his crucifixion and was the first to see him at his resurrection. Mother Teresa, of course, she is a global icon. She has been selfless in her conquest against poverty, injustice, and she personally cared for thousands of sick and dying people. She was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979. Rosa Parks, here in the United States, refused to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and that indirectly led to some of the most significant civil rights legislation in American history. So go Rosa Parks. Helen Keller became deaf and blind at 19 months old. Overcoming that frustration of losing both her hearing and her sight, she campaigned tirelessly for deaf and blind women, children, and men. Indira Gandhi was the first female Prime Minister of India, and Margaret Thatcher, the first Prime Minister of Great Britain. Oprah Winfrey. If you don't know who Oprah Winfrey is, she is arguably one of the most influential women currently living in the United States. She first began on a talk show, and I even remember watching her with my mom and laughing at some of her jokes and tuning in almost weekly to make sure we saw her guests and heard what she had to say. Diana, Princess Diana, she is a British royal princess who died, but she's noted for her humanitarian charity work. Amazing woman. And currently there is a 19-year-old girl that I would love to honor, and her name is Malala Yousafzai. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She's a Pakistani schoolgirl that was shot in the head by the Taliban, and she survived. Because of that, she's become a global advocate for women's rights and especially women in education. So let's give thanks to all these women. Let's not forget to celebrate International Women's Day, which is on March 8th, and continue celebrating this month, which is Women's History Month. Thank you for tuning in.